Operation Cerberus. The Dash Through the English Channel. Part 1. Introduction and Background. The year was 1942, and the war in Europe had reached a critical juncture. On one side, the Allies were tightening their grip on occupied Europe, enforcing naval blockades and bombarding German ports. On the other, the Kriegsmarine faced dwindling options to move its powerful capital ships without drawing devastating attacks. Among these ships, three giants of German naval engineering stood out: the battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, and the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen. Each carried the weight of strategy, pride, and immense destructive potential. By early 1942, the situation in German-occupied France had become perilous for these ships. Stationed in Brest, the trio of warships faced relentless British air attacks, constant reconnaissance, and the ever-present threat of Allied naval patrols in the Atlantic. Remaining in port was increasingly risky, yet moving them through the English Channel, a narrow stretch of sea heavily patrolled and defended, seemed almost suicidal. Yet the German High Command, driven by a mix of audacity, desperation, and strategy, devised one of the boldest naval operations of the Second World War, Operation Cerberus, known to the British as the Channel Dash. Operation Cerberus would require not only the ships themselves but also meticulous coordination with the Luftwaffe for air cover, precise timing, and the sheer nerve of the crews to run the gauntlet past British coastal defenses. The stakes were immense. Success would restore German naval initiative in the Atlantic, moving these ships from the vulnerable French ports to safer harbors in Germany. Failure would mean the destruction of some of the Kriegsmarine's most powerful vessels and a catastrophic blow to German morale. In the following story, we will explore the daring planning, the tension-filled journey, the explosive encounters with British forces, and the dramatic outcome of this audacious dash through the English Channel. Part 2. Planning and Preparations. The audacity of Operation Cerberus began long before the ships left Brest. The German High Command understood that success depended on precision, secrecy, and overwhelming coordination. Every detail had to be planned, every potential threat assessed. The strategic imperative. For Hitler and the Kriegsmarine, the three ships represented not just naval firepower but symbols of prestige and deterrence. The British Royal Navy, aware of their presence in Brest, had made clear its intent to strike at them if an opportunity arose. Remaining in the French ports under constant threat of air raids and blockade could mean eventual destruction. Relocating the ships to safer bases in Germany, primarily Kiel, would preserve them for future operations in the North Sea and beyond. But doing so meant passing through the English Channel, a narrow, heavily defended waterway stretching just 33 miles at its narrowest point and dominated by British coastal batteries, patrols, and aircraft. The plan. Admiral Otto Ciliax, commander of the flotilla, devised a daring plan. Under the cover of darkness and with full coordination with the Luftwaffe, the ships would dash through the channel, relying on speed, surprise, and protective air cover to evade the British. Key elements included: 1. Timing. The operation was set for February 11, 1942. The night provided darkness, while early morning fog could further obscure their movements. 2. Air cover. The Luftwaffe was tasked with providing continuous fighter cover, preventing Allied reconnaissance planes from spotting the ships. This coordination would be crucial. Even a single sighting could bring the Royal Navy down upon them. 3. Electronic countermeasures. German forces carefully managed radio silence and deceptive signals to avoid alerting British radar stations and coastal observers. 4. Escort and support. Fast attack craft, minesweepers, and torpedo boats were assigned to accompany the flotilla, protecting against smaller British vessels and mines. The challenges. The Germans were painfully aware of the risks. The English Channel was the most heavily patrolled waterway in Europe, bristling with British destroyers, motor torpedo boats, and minefields. British coastal artillery and radar stations could detect ships within hours, and the Royal Air Force was always ready to launch air attacks. Even with night cover and fog, the Channel's narrow confines meant that a single mistake could result in disaster. Secrecy and deception. To maintain secrecy, the Germans implemented an elaborate web of deception. Radio silence was strictly enforced. False intelligence leaks were planted to mislead the British about the timing and route. Air reconnaissance was carefully controlled. Every crew member knew that exposure could mean catastrophe not just for the mission but for their lives. As preparations continued, the tension grew on both sides. In Brest, sailors made final checks of the massive guns of Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, while the Prinz Eugen's crew ensured their heavy cruiser was fully fueled and combat-ready. Engineers and officers double-checked engines, navigation systems, and communications equipment. The crews knew the Channel was no ordinary stretch of water. It was a deadly gauntlet lined with danger at every turn. With plans in place and the crews ready, the stage was set for one of the most daring naval operations of the Second World War. The next phase would see these steel giants attempt a feat that many considered impossible: the dash through the English Channel. Part 3. The dash begins. In the early hours of February 11, 1942, the crews of Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, and Prinz Eugen prepared for what would become one of the most audacious naval maneuvers of the Second World War. Darkness enveloped Brest, but tension burned like fire in the hearts of every sailor and officer. Engines roared to life, the massive hulls of the ships vibrating as steam pressure surged through turbines and boilers. Every gun, every radar, every lookout was ready. The departure. At precisely 1 o'clock, under the cover of night, the flotilla slipped silently from the harbor. German spotlights had been dimmed, the sound of engines massed where possible, and a tight formation was maintained. Minesweepers and fast torpedo boats flanked the larger ships, their mission to detect mines and provide early warning of British patrols. Initial contact. As they entered the Channel, tension rose. British coastal radar stations were still operational, and any misstep could result in instant engagement. Fortunately for the Germans, poor weather, fog and low clouds, provided additional concealment. Still, the Channel was a gauntlet, and the crews knew it. Every lookout scanned the dark waters, searching for the glint of enemy searchlights or the silhouettes of patrolling destroyers. The Luftwaffe's role. The German Air Force played a decisive part. Dozens of Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters and Junkers Ju-88 bombers patrolled above, ready to intercept any British reconnaissance planes. This air umbrella was crucial. Without it, the Royal Air Force could have spotted the flotilla and coordinated an immediate naval strike. Encounters with the British. As dawn approached, the flotilla faced its first skirmishes. Small British patrol boats attempted to intercept the giants, but torpedo attacks were narrowly avoided thanks to the skill of German navigators. The roar of anti-aircraft guns filled the air as British aircraft launched attacks, only to be driven off by coordinated German fighter cover. The tension was palpable. Every explosion, every flare, could signal the end of the mission. A race against time. The German ships maintained high speed, often exceeding 27 knots, pushing engines and crews to their limits. Navigational precision was essential. One wrong turn could mean a minefield or running into the full force of British coastal batteries. For hours, the flotilla raced through the Channel, alternating between speed, evasive maneuvers, and careful coordination with Luftwaffe fighters. Dramatic moments. The dash was not without close calls. At one point, Scharnhorst narrowly avoided a torpedo launched from a British motor torpedo boat. Explosions from near misses rocked the water, shaking the decks and sending sailors scrambling. Anti-aircraft guns fired continuously, their flashes illuminating the dark sea. Meanwhile, British coastal artillery opened fire from multiple points, shells whistling through the air, missing the massive ships by mere hundreds of meters. Yet, despite the chaos, the German flotilla pressed onward. Coordination between the ships, meticulous navigation, and sheer daring allowed them to evade destruction. By mid-morning, after hours of nerve-wracking maneuvers, the three giants had cleared the most dangerous stretches of the channel. Surprise and shock. When news reached the British Admiralty that Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, and Prinz Eugen had successfully traversed the channel, disbelief reigned. It was a bold stroke that few had predicted, an audacious gamble that had paid off. Part 4. The Final Leg and Arrival. By late morning of February 11, 1942, the German flotilla had survived the most perilous stretch of the channel. But the operation was far from over. Ahead lay the North Sea, still patrolled by the Royal Navy, and a long journey northward along the Dutch and German coasts. The crews of Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, and Prinz Eugen knew that a single mistake could invite disaster, yet the audacity of their dash had given them a psychological edge. Maintaining momentum. The ships continued at high speed, engines straining and crews on edge. Every lookout scanned the horizon, anticipating enemy destroyers, mines, or aircraft. Coordination with the Luftwaffe remained critical, and the German fighters patrolled overhead, ready to intercept any British reconnaissance planes. Close encounters. Despite the meticulous planning, danger never fully disappeared. British destroyers attempted to intercept the flotilla, launching torpedoes in coordinated attacks. Each torpedo that passed near the massive ships sent shudders through steel decks and hearts alike. At one point, Gneisenau took minor damage from near-miss shells, but the crew managed repairs quickly while under constant threat. Navigational challenges. Navigating the North Sea was complicated by tides, shallow waters, and the lingering threat of mines. Every course correction required precision, as a single miscalculation could result in grounding or detonating a mine. The flotilla relied on experienced officers and the latest navigational charts to guide them safely through. Air threats persist. The Luftwaffe's presence was invaluable, yet British aircraft continued to shadow the flotilla from a distance, dropping flares to illuminate positions and guide naval attacks. Anti-aircraft gunners remained vigilant, firing relentlessly to protect the ships. The combination of speed, heavy armor, and skilled crews allowed the flotilla to survive these attacks, but exhaustion was setting in. Sailors had been awake for hours, working in freezing conditions, their nerves stretched to the breaking point. The arrival in Germany. Finally, in the late hours of February 11th, the flotilla reached Wilhelmshaven, a major German naval base. The operation had succeeded against overwhelming odds. The three ships, symbols of German naval power, had dashed through one of the most heavily defended stretches of water in the world and emerged largely unscathed. For the crews, relief and pride mingled with exhaustion. Months of tension, danger, and meticulous planning had culminated in a historic achievement. Immediate consequences. The success of Operation Cerberus shocked the Allies. British Naval Command faced criticism for failing to stop the flotilla, despite superior numbers and coastal defenses. For Germany, the operation was a propaganda victory, demonstrating the daring and skill of the Kriegsmarine. Strategically, it allowed the battleships and cruiser to operate in the North Sea, where they could threaten Arctic convoys and continue to challenge Allied naval operations. Part 5. Conclusion and Aftermath. Operation Cerberus stands as one of the most daring and audacious naval operations of the Second World War. Against overwhelming odds, the Kriegsmarine managed to relocate Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, and Prinz Eugen from Brest in occupied France to German ports through the narrow, heavily defended English Channel, a feat that many military analysts had deemed impossible. Why it succeeded? The operation's success relied on several critical factors. 1. Speed and surprise. The flotilla's rapid movement and night departure minimized exposure to British detection. The daring gamble to travel through the Channel directly rather than taking the longer route around Scotland caught the Allies off guard. 2. Air support. The Luftwaffe provided continuous air cover, neutralizing reconnaissance planes and deterring attacks from the Royal Air Force. The coordination between Navy and Air Force was unprecedented and crucial to the mission. 3. Secrecy and planning. Strict radio silence, deception measures, and meticulous navigation allowed the Germans to avoid detection for most of the journey. Every contingency had been considered, from torpedo attacks to minefields. 4. Skill and determination of crews. Perhaps the most important factor was the courage, discipline, and skill of the sailors. Operating massive battleships under extreme stress, constant threat of attack, and freezing conditions required nerves of steel. The British response. The Royal Navy and RAF were stunned. Despite having numerical superiority and extensive coastal defenses, they failed to intercept the German flotilla. Investigations later revealed coordination issues, delays in deploying aircraft, and underestimation of German audacity. The Channel Dash became a source of both frustration and embarrassment for the British military. Long-term consequences. For Germany, the operation preserved 3 of its most powerful warships, allowing them to remain active in the North Sea and threaten Allied shipping. It also provided a significant morale boost and a propaganda victory. Strategically, however, the operation did not change the overall course of the war. The Kriegsmarine could not significantly alter Allied control of the Atlantic, and the ships remained vulnerable to air attacks in their new home ports. For the Allies, the failure highlighted weaknesses in coastal surveillance and response coordination, leading to reforms in radar deployment, air-naval cooperation, and rapid reaction procedures. Legacy. Operation Cerberus remains a textbook example of high-risk, high-reward military strategy. It demonstrated the power of surprise, coordination, and boldness in warfare. The Channel Dash continues to fascinate historians and military enthusiasts alike, not just for the tactical achievement, but for the human stories of bravery, endurance, and nerve that it produced. Final thought. The dash of Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, and Prinz Eugen through the English Channel was more than a naval operation. It was a testament to audacity, preparation, and the thin line between disaster and glory. For the sailors who endured it, it was a journey through danger that would be remembered for a lifetime. For the world, it was a moment where courage and daring reshaped the course of a single, pivotal day in naval history.